This is Christine Brown, and while I have to listen to this podcast as my motherly duty, you have the choice not to. My sons, and of course Michael, sometimes say some naughty things when they're trying to be funny, but really, they're just being stupid. You still want to listen? Go right ahead. I am not your mother.
All right, welcome to the second inaugural episode of the Patriots Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Brown. With me today, we have Mike Mello, all the way from Los Angeles, California. Producer, director, screenwriter, actor.
Wow, thank you for that.
Yeah, well, I got to pump your tires up a little bit.
I appreciate that. They're a little flat these days.
All right, well, I'm sure your talent will shine through in this as well.
I think so.
Yeah, I do too. Speaking of talent, we also have joining us today Steve Brown, one of my brothers, the one that will actually join us today.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going, Steve? I'm marketing and golf expert, Steve Brown, so I'm sure that'll come in handy as we talk about neither of those things.
Mm-hmm.
And also with him, we have a special guest tonight. We have Jeff Carr, Steve's friend, who
What up?
is a 49ers fan, so we won't hold that against him.
Jimmy G.
Jimmy Grapes, baby.
To be fair, he's a 49ers fan when this season was going on, even though he lived in New Hampshire.
Yeah, well, I think growing up, a lot of us were 49ers fans as well as Patriots fans, perhaps, because it was tough being a Patriots fan back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Well, yeah, that's why I watched the season 2000 recap video instead of all of the games.
Exactly, yeah. So let's start there. There was some debate when we started this about when the actual dynasty started. And so the vote was to start in the 2001 season, but I think it's a good idea that we kind of recap the 2000 season because that was kind of the official start date on paper when Belichick took over the team, when Brady was drafted, even though you didn't see any of Brady. So we watched in preparation for this the NFL Films season recap, which was probably generously titled "Building for Tomorrow." And when you have something with that sort of name on it, you know that the season didn't go well.
I always wondered, what the shitty teams do with these, because everyone gets one of these, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think they make one for every team every year.
Yeah, who's buying this?
Like a 2019 Dolphins one?
Oh, I think completionists are buying these. But I'm pretty sure I remember seeing a Buccaneers one from back in the day when they're still wearing the creamsicles.
Mm.
And it was sad because, it was basically one replay over and over again because they just didn't have any positive moments on the season.
That's going to be the Dolphins this year.
Yeah, same idea.
I don't know. They just made a quarterback switch, so look out.
The same quarterback switch that's the opposite quarter, kind of the same quarterback switch that the Cardinals made, and then they made the opposite.
They switched
one
again, right?
the season after, yeah. Oops. All right, so I guess it's no surprise then that the Patriots finished 5-11 that season, and even before that, they were on a downwards trend anyway. Because they went to Super Bowl with Parcells, and was it 96, and then he left for the Jets and brought Curtis Martin with him with all that hullabaloo, and
he took Belichick too.
He did. That's true. Yeah, but he took Belichick with him. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's call a spade here.
Yeah. Well, I'm still blaming on Parcells, but yeah. Yeah, no, Belichick can do no wrong, so we're not going to blame him on this podcast.
Right.
Yet. Yeah, at least in 01, we won't blame him.
Yeah, don't talk about our Lord.
So Pete Carroll took over from Parcells and won one last game every season he was there. So they were 11-5 when they went to Super Bowl, then they were 10-6 in Carroll's first year. And then 9-7 and then 8-8 before they finally got rid of him. They bring in Belichick, who went 5-11, but beat some surprisingly good teams. Weirdly, two of their wins were at Denver, against the Broncos, who finished 11-5 that season, which they'd never win in Denver. And then they beat the Colts at home when the Colts were still in the AFC East back then. And the Colts finished 10-6, and both those teams went to the playoffs. And one of their other wins, one of the only other wins they had was against this Bengals team that we're starting the season with. And that's kind of all there was to the 2000 season. There wasn't much to talk about.
I beg to differ. There was a lot going on, man. Oh yeah, I got notes, man. It's called show prep.
All right, let's hear it, because I took notes too, but all I could find were issues, and I didn't want to start on a no.
They're not. I mean, issues are, that's a relatable term, I guess. I mean, they're things happened, right? And we're talking about them. My first note is that I can't believe this video exists. So that was the top one. I'm right there with Steve.
On YouTube.
Right.
Things you can find on the internet. It's pretty impressive.
I mean, I was more interested with, like, you know, the way that Belichick became the head coach, things that were happening with Terry Glenn, the Ty Law incident. So, I mean, this was like before social media, so I guess people might not remember or care or whatever, but if this stuff was happening today, I think it would be a little bit different. So I don't know if people remember some of that stuff, but I think it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, because that was the Canada incident. Is that what you're talking about?
Oh yeah, the with Terry Glenn and Ty Law.
Yeah, and Troy Brown, actually.
Oh, and Troy Brown. Okay, that's an unlikely one.
Yeah, it was them three that went because they played a game. From what I understand, they played a game in Buffalo in the winter, and so the weather was real bad, and the three of them were not big flyers, so they stayed up there an extra night because they didn't want to fly in the snow. Went to I want to say Montreal or Niagara or something like that, and got into some trouble on the way back, I believe. I can't remember exactly what it was. Do you remember?
I mean, I'm pretty sure that Ty Law got arrested for ecstasy.
Yeah, but because I think they found it in the car on the way back, but he said it wasn't his. It was like his cousin's or something.
Sure, right. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer, so I mean, I don't care. But
Troy Brown doesn't need ecstasy, Steven.
Yeah, you see those eyes?
He's just generally happy. Football is his drug.
And now look at Pat Chung gets busted, his burglar alarm trips automatically,
and who's still a part of the team? Troy Brown. Coincidence?
That's true.
I didn't even think about that.
The coaching staff, Pat Chung gets popped. Jeez.
Oh boy.
So that was something.
Walking the dangerous line already.
It's just stuff that happened, you know?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I have read the Troy Brown autobiography, and he did address it in there. So,
what did he say?
I will say that
anything.
That recap video was kind of nice. There was a blindside hit on Peyton Manning, which I really liked.
Did you watch that part over and over again?
I did rewind that part. Yeah. Well, they played it 3 times too, so I got to watch it 12.
Yeah, that's what I was talking about when I was saying there weren't a whole lot of highlights for some of these teams. There was a lot of repeats I felt in this video.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the highlights for me, I don't know if you guys remember this or not, but I mean, there was the Michael Bishop Hail Mary versus the Colts, right before the half. So that was pretty awesome. I would say top 20 plays of the Patriots that year.
Okay. That was almost a real hot take.
There's the fake field goal against the Colts, and then there was a Tabaki Jones interception, so they beat the Colts. So that was pretty cool. We saw a little bit of Glenn, so that was nice before we never saw him again. Let's see. That pretty much covers it.
I thought it was interesting how better quality the Chiefs primetime game was.
Yes.
Video quality was way better on that, and Willie was mic'd up, which was awesome.
Yes.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Willie McGinnis in his prime at that point, I think, kind of early 2000s was his prime, and that dude kind of looked like a grown man playing with smaller children on the same field. He was just so much bigger. I felt like everybody in these highlights are bigger. Like they all look like they're a team full of fullbacks on offense. And just
That's because they're wearing massive shoulder pads.
yeah, I think that's part of it, but I think they're also just like defenses were bigger because it was still a run first league back in the early 2000s, like late 90s. There wasn't this focus on the passing game. So people were just massive. Like you look at Loy Malloy, and he wouldn't, I don't think, last as a safety in today's NFL.
No way. It was telling that they're like, oh, Drew Bledsoe has passed for 3,000 yards in like 7 straight seasons.
Yes. Yeah, that was one of the stats. Yeah.
That is crazy, though, that was like a major accomplishment. And then you have, I mean, what do you guys think about that, too? I mean, obviously the rules have changed and everything, but yeah, like big deal. And then you have the next generation that was hitting 4. Now you have Mahomes and Breeze, who are pretty much doing it every season. Maybe not Breeze anymore, but do you think that
5,000.
like 5,000 is now going to be the sort of goal?
I think so. And I think that just makes what Dan Marino did back in the day, throwing for 5,000 yards, back when everybody was still throwing for 3, that much more impressive.
True. Yeah, he was a beast.
It does seem like somebody does it every year, or gets real close to it every year nowadays. It's just not quite the same.
Yeah, so that is an interesting point. It was fun to look back on. But 7 years straight doing that, Bledsoe slinging it, that's something.
Jeff's got a hot take.
I just heard on ESPN today that they think Mahomes is going to be the first 100,000-yard guy.
Whoa.
I could see that. I could also see Brady playing till he's 48 and hitting it as well, though. Because he's at 70-something thousand, 78,000. So, with the league the way it is, if Brady can throw 5,000 yards in another 5 years, why not?
I don't know if Brady's ever thrown for 5,000 yards.
He has.
Yeah, he has.
Once, I think.
In 07, right?
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
He might have done it twice, actually.
He's going to do it again this year. We can all agree on that.
Fingers crossed.
I mean, yeah, he's going to do it every year from now on, I'm pretty sure.
Also, I think you had made a while back on the coaching staff on the Pats that year, which is pretty interesting, with Eric Mangini and Rob Ryan. Scott Pioli was still there.
Yeah, there was a surprisingly amount of big names back in these days. Yeah, you got Rob Ryan as your linebackers coach.
Yeah.
Underneath Eric Mangini. Yeah. Eric Mangini was a defensive backs coach at that point, wasn't he? I think so. Oh, we're looking at 2000. But yeah, I think just the amount of
coaches
that were, yeah, Eric Mangini, defensive backs, Rob Ryan as your linebackers. I didn't realize Rob Ryan was attached to the Patriots in that way. I was just think of him as Rex Ryan's
long-haired,
hairier brother. Yeah, exactly.
Yep. But then I looked into it further, and there's some other guys that nobody really mentions, but check this out. You got Jeff Davidson. Oh, no, hey. Jeff Davidson, the O-line assistant coach. Today, O-line coach, Detroit Lions. Next guy, right?
He's still in the league. Okay.
Marcus Paul, assistant strength and conditioning coach. Now, head strength and conditioning coach of the Dallas Cowboys. And Dwayne Walker, defensive assistant, he's kicking around as DB coach at Cleveland. So that's something that most people don't talk about.
That's true, because you always hear about how all the Belichick disciples go out and fail, because you only ever hear the guys taking the head coach positions. But the fact that all these other guys are still in the league, I mean, I know in 01, that was Josh McDaniels' first year.
Oh, that's right.
Technically still in the league, but yeah, and I think Brian Daboll is still in the league as well, isn't he? Because he was.
Yes, he is.
Whoa.
And Matty Walsh was on the staff at this point. Do you remember that guy?
I do remember Matt Walsh, yeah.
He was a little video assistant fellow that may have had something to do with the old Spygate situation. So he was kicking around the Pats. Yeah.
Oh, Brian
in the
Dable
media
is the,
guide, by the way. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say Brian Dable is the offensive coordinator for the Buffalo Bills right now.
See? I mean, it's a beautiful thing. But yeah, this Matty Walsh guy, it has to be said in the media guide, I was looking it over, and it is written that he auditioned to be an MTV VJ, and he's single. So that's a good professional resume right there. And finally,
Do you think
last but not least, I would venture to get. I'm. That's too controversial for me to speak on. But and last but not least, Dick Rabine used to be the quarterback's coach, and now he's dead. So
Yes, yeah, because he died between the 2000 2001.
unfortunate circumstance. Yeah, he passed after a stress test.
Yep.
So
that was the guy that wanted to draft Brady.
Right.
oh, that's right.
Yes. So I think that's a good segue into this 2001 season, because there were some things that happened during the offseason. And that was one of the big ones was the death of their wide receiver coach, because I think that was kind of like playing for what's Robert Kraft's wife's name?
Myra.
Myra, exactly. Yeah. So playing for Myra Kraft that year where they had the stickers on the helmets, it felt kind of similar to that. He was kind of one of those people who had been there for a while, and everybody talked highly of him, and it was kind of an unexpected death. But the other big news was Terry Glenn, because he got popped for smoking weed during the offseason, was suspended 4 games by the league, and then decided not to show up to training camp because I think there was like some money stuff going on as well. So Belichick turned around and just suspended him for the entire season.
Which I think was a precursor to everything he was going to do for the next 20 years. And the NFLPA, the NFL, everybody was involved. They were trying to figure out if this was within the rules. I mean, knowing Belichick, he probably studied it up and down before doing it. But
exactly, yeah, because they were worried going to set some sort of precedent if Terry Glenn challenged this and then it got overturned, and now the players have all this power. But I'm gonna say that didn't happen because we didn't really hear much from Terry Glenn after that, other than getting.
Well, everyone says Belichick can make these crazy moves because he has so much tenure in New England, but proves he doesn't. And this is his second year, and he's suspending Terry Glenn as their best receiver by far.
Yeah,
I mean, Bert Emanuel, really?
Yeah,
I know, man, that's insane.
Does he have a Super Bowl ring?
You got to imagine he does. He was, unless he got cut further on.
But they usually give him to everybody who played that year.
I guess. So I mean, I think he has a good
safety.
Good chance he has one.
What? I don't remember this guy.
There's a lot of those, I think, in the beginning of the season.
He just gets absolutely blown up by Corey Dillon.
Yeah.
He bounces off Corey Dillon like he's made of rubber. He just goes flying.
Yeah, there was a few of those, especially this week 1 game. There was a few people that I didn't even recognize the names. Never mind. Be like, oh yeah, I remember that guy. It was just like a whole bunch of not even remembering that they were on the team.
Outside of David Patton.
Yeah, so that was the thing, is because Terry Glenn was suspended for the year, David Patton, they actually had in the Boston Globe, I pulled up some of the old Boston Globe articles from around this time, and one of them was basically about how he was working at some place carrying bags of coffee beans and tearing up his hands before he got the call that he was going to be playing for the Patriots. And we all know how that turned out.
Yeah, he said it was divine intervention.
Yeah, exactly. Because the carrying coffee was God's punishment for him because he hadn't learned his lessons yet. But apparently, he just enough because he got the call from Bill Belichick once Terry Glenn was out for the year. And we know how that turned out for both of them, for both Terry Glenn and the little speedster.
Now, Glenn, though, the interesting thing about him was that he had signed a new contract the previous year.
It was kind of a monster one.
It was, yeah. At the time, it was 6 years, 50 mil with 11 guaranteed, which is like, not much by today's standards, but back then it was pretty decent.
Yeah, that's top wide receiver money for the time.
Right.
I mean, similar to some other deals that happened.
Well, and then I also saw that I didn't realize this, but Pete Carroll had suspended him before Belichick got there as well. So
I didn't see that.
Yeah, in '99. So there was already a little bit of a precedent there.
Yeah. I remember him always having a tumultuous relationship. Because even when Parcells was running the team and they had that press conference about Terry Glenn had an injury and Parcells didn't believe that he was injured. He just thought he was sitting out. And so they asked him how Terry Glenn was, and he said, yeah, she's fine.
Right.
In true Parcells fashion.
That's like the only thing I remember about Terry Glenn.
Well, that and that sparked the whole if you want me to be the cook, you got to let me buy the groceries.
Exactly.
With Robert Kraft and Terry Glenn. He pretty much hated him.
Yeah, because Terry Glenn was Robert Kraft's draft pick, not Bill Belichick's.
Right.
Bill Parcells, rather.
Right. And then, obviously Terry Glenn passed in a accident, but pretty much every interview that I heard after that incident was that, he was a good guy. He was just troubled and never really figured it out. So it's kind of a sad story in that sense because he had the talent and the style, but
yes.
he just didn't quite put it together.
Yeah, it felt like one of those guys where it came easy to him before coming into the pros. So it never really seemed like he had to give much effort coming in. Didn't know how to do that once he got there.
Yeah.
And so, he just never really put it all together. Whereas the opposite side of that would probably be Troy Brown, who didn't quite have the talent, but just worked his balls off and kept making the team. And from his biography that I read, basically the only, he kind of just hung around barely by the skin of his teeth on Parcells and Carroll's teams. But Belichick kind of day one came to him and says, I remember you from when I was the defensive coach when I was here last, and I've watched a bunch of tape on you, and I know what you can do, so we're going to basically feature you in this offense.
1,200 yards, 5 touchdowns this year.
Yeah, and 2001 was his best year as a receiver because he was kind of the number one guy because, like you said, who else was it? Especially at the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, even in 2000, he almost got 1,000 yards. I think it was like 950 or something like that. So given that team, 944 yards and 4 touchdowns the year before, 12.9 return average in 2000 as well. So he was on his way to be a part of the team in that fashion.
The original Wes Welker.
Exactly. He was kind of that. Yeah. The original Gunnar Olszewski, if you will.
Oh, boy.
Oh, that's a hot take.
It is. All right, so let's that's kind of the lead up. So let's because we're haven't actually talked about the game yet, and we're about a half hour in here. But is there anything else you want to touch on real quick before we do get to the game?
I mean, Willie McGinnis and Chris Slade had a pretty nice bromance.
Yep.
So I missed that, and that's about it for me.
A couple notable draft picks for this year was the first round pick was Richard Seymour. And they also drafted Matt Light in the second round. So 2 big names. That was kind of the only names I recognized from this draft. There was a bunch of turnover from the 2000 season. The announcers in this game actually pointed out there was 38 new players from a year ago, and 18 of those were free agents. So Belichick basically just gutted the team that he had before, brought in a bunch of veteran guys, and I think that was his way of trying to set the tone for what this locker room was going to be, which I think still holds today. He's created that core now that doesn't change as much because you got Brady that's there the whole time, but that was his kind of method from the get-go, was to build that culture of accountability and bringing in the guys who knew what they were doing to help the young team kind of gel a little bit. And if you didn't know that, just watch this first game because the commentators wouldn't get off that topic for basically the whole third quarter when the Patriots stopped playing football.
Well, it's interesting too because a lot of the guys are older guys, like you said, veterans, and they're
Like
they
10,
had a
11
little
year veterans.
right. They had a little bit of like a chip on their shoulder. They had an attitude, which is interesting because it fit with the Belichick type attitude. It wasn't like this arrogant type thing, but like Brian Cox, I remember he was like flipping people off, and then he became a Patriot.
Yeah, that was the name I was going to bring up.
He had like an entire like neck roll on his shoulder.
Oh my god, yeah. That went like almost above the back of his helmet. It was
Yeah, that thing is awesome.
looked like the headrest for your car seat. It was awesome. So all right, and the one last thing that they kept harping on too was that this season they had replacement referees, which I did not remember.
Yeah, I do remember that. It only lasted like I think 3 weeks or the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean that doesn't surprise me considering what happened after week 1. But yeah, it was kind of when I was reading the papers leading up to it and afterwards, it like half the articles were about these replacement refs and how they did and how they were going to do, and every time they made a call in the field, it's like, oh, these replacement refs look like real referees. Yeah, okay.
Now, didn't that happen like a couple of years ago as well? Am I mistaken on
It
this?
did, yeah, because
But it was in the age of social media, so it was way magnified.
yeah, it got
right.
blown up because they miscalled a Hail Mary for
Seattle?
the
Green Bay,
Seahawks
yeah.
Packers game, right?
Yep.
And one called it incomplete, one called it a catch, and they had the picture of one guy waving it off and one guy with his hands up. So
So the NFL still hasn't learned their lesson from 20 years ago, I guess.
no, yeah, I'm sure we'll have that coming up soon again, whenever the next
Oh, yeah.
CBA is for them. All right, so yeah, let's finally get to this game. This was week 1 of the 2001 season, like we said. Again, it was in Cincinnati against the Bengals, who the year before had not done well. They were, I think they're 4-12 or something like that. Something real bad. Yeah, they were 4-12 the year before, but their only real contributor, especially on offense, was Corey Dillon. Like the only 2 names I recognized from the Bengals roster, other than John Kitna, and I didn't recognize that for a good reason, was Corey Dillon and Takeo Spikes.
Peter Warwick, I remember him, and he was pretty good in this game.
Yeah, that's true. I vaguely remember his name. I don't remember him being as good as he was being hyped up to be, but the man made some quality catches in this game, at the very least.
Yeah, that one-handed grab was sweet.
Yeah. Oh, that was Darnay Scott. Sorry, that wasn't.
Oh, yeah. Darnay Scott's legit.
Yeah. For some reason, I always had Darnay Scott in my head as a quarterback, and I don't know why. I don't know who I'm confusing him with, but it was someone like that.
When Chad Johnson was on their team, but he didn't play at all.
Yeah, because this was his rookie season, and so the commentators made some comment about how he looked good in preseason, and they were excited to see what he could do. I don't think they quite understood what they had on that, but yeah. Speaking of the commentators, I thought that was quite a quality crew for such a game that was probably not touted to be like one of the A-list games. It was Gus Johnson back in the day, who makes everything sound really exciting. I didn't think Brent Jones added much, but Sam Weish, the old coach of the Cincinnati Bengals, actually did, I thought, a really good job.
Well, I thought that other guy sounded like Tony Romo a little bit.
Which other guy, Brent Jones?
Yeah.
Really?
I was like, Tony Romo? No.
I didn't catch that. But yeah, I thought like Sam Weish, he kind of had that, like you could tell he just came from coaching, because he was all about like calling out the players who were getting away with penalties and stuff like that. Like he caught some offensive lineman holding twice on one play. Like, I don't know how he got away with one, never mind 2 of them. It was all up and down.
Jeff remembers Brent Jones from his playing days.
Yeah, Brent Jones was a 49ers tight end, I believe.
Yeah, he was like Steve Young's go-to.
Yeah. Because they had some banter halfway through because Brent Jones's 49ers actually beat Sam Weich's Bengals in the Super Bowl. And so Sam Weich's comment was something along the lines of, they beat us because we couldn't cover their tight ends. And I don't know if that was actually true or not, or if he was just pandering to his audience.
But to your point, after watching some of the 2000 season, I mean, I didn't realize that there was such a difference in sort of level of quality between teams, but the announcing unit was pretty pretty on point on this one.
Yeah, I was surprised because I watched some of the 2000 games too, and you had some, I don't know, Dan Cricky and who was the other guy that did them with him, and they were just not the top crew. I don't think it's kind of like getting Dan Dierdorf these days or someone like that. I don't know, Dan Dierdorf. I don't even think he's doing it anymore, but just those. Oh no, who did the last recent Patriots game? It was Iron Eagle and Dan Fouts.
Yeah,
It's like getting that crew. Yeah.
What about old Scotty Zolak? You like him?
I like Scott Zolak, but only because he's such a huge homer. I kind of enjoy that, especially like because he's a local guy. I enjoy that. Same with like Gil and Gino back in the day.
Well, that recap video just had Gil and Gino. It was amazing.
Yeah,
all there. It was.
Yeah, no, I love hearing those two call the games because they were just kind of like that was like the history for me is hearing their voices.
Oh yeah, Mom used to mute the TV and then put the radio underneath it, and Gil and Gino.
I'm pretty sure that's where we got our hatred of TV commentators. Actually, was from Mom.
Yeah.
She would yell at the TV with the best of them. Some other general things about this game that I found interesting was extra points still from the 1 yard line, and yet there were people that still almost missed them. And the fans in Cincinnati in this game were like super hardos. Those the guys
saw amazing mustache.
Yeah, there was a whole bunch of mustaches. It's almost like the 80s hadn't left Cincinnati yet in 2001, but they had the hard hat, but with the Bengals colors. It was beautiful. All right, let's see what else we got here.
Let's do like best and worst because I got a good worst.
All right. Well, yeah. Is there anything else you want to touch on before we do that?
I mean, there is quite a bit on here. Yeah. I mean, I hate. It was such a. I mean, nothing really happened in this game. It was one of the more boring games I've ever watched. But there are, you see certain signs of things. I mean, you saw the toughness of the team in the first half. I mean, they kind of like gave up in the second half, but Bledsoe was slinging it, taking the hits as usual, and he had just signed a contract that was supposed to basically be his career contract, where he was supposed to retire in New England, and that he was just coming off of that. So he was sort of supposed to be the savior of the franchise at that point.
Yeah, I actually wrote down the comment that the commentator said. It said, "Oh, here's Drew Bledsoe. They signed a He signed a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract that should keep him a Patriot through the end of his career."
Yep.
Week 1, 2001.
2 years.
Yeah.
Well, and it's crazy because they also said that he was the second longest with the team, probably of like active players, and Favre was number 1. And he was at like 9 years. So you look at Brady now; he's going on 20. I mean, that's just unheard of.
It really is. Yeah, 20,
it was an
20 years in the league is for a non-kicker is out of control. But to have all those with the same team is even more so. Because even Brett Favre, who's like the poster child of longevity, how many teams did he end up playing for? 3 at the end of the day? Because it was most of it with the Packers. And then,
the Vikings. And Jets, yep.
I think that was it, right?
Yep. Well, actually, he was with the Falcons.
Oh, right. Yeah, originally he was drafted by the Falcons.
Yeah.
That's true, yeah. Yeah.
Even ours man crushes ended up going somewhere else. Like Montana went to the Chiefs.
Yep.
Where did Steve Young go?
Steve Young.
He started with Tampa.
I wanted to say he went to the hospital, but that would be not funny.
Yikes.
I know.
He's
moving on.
I love it. All right. I think that just touching on Drew Bledsoe again, I was surprised at how mobile he was, because in the couple of games that I watched of the 2000 season and then this game, he was not afraid to take off, which was surprising because he was like 6'8", 180 pounds. Like, he was not a massive dude. He was just kind of this tall, gangly guy. But he was not afraid to like take off and try to lower the boom on people, which, we'll see how that comes back to bite him.
Well, that was the other thing, though. It's like throughout the game, and I think throughout the 2000 season, from what I saw, every announcer pointed out, man, I don't know if the coach likes him doing this. Oh, man, I don't know how long he can stay in there. So, I mean, obviously foreshadowing, but it happened every game, which, I mean, you could say it's the line's fault, but Bledsoe, I don't know, man. Like, he held the ball held on to it a little too long. I mean, those rollouts didn't help the across the body, across the field. I mean, so I don't know if it's his fault or the O-line's fault or they didn't have receivers or what, but it was awful to watch.
Yeah, it felt like at least early in the 2000 season that I watched, a lot of it was the O-line's fault, but I think there's equal blame to go around because he would like double clutch it or even triple clutch it on some plays. Like his first guy wasn't open, it took him a while to go through his progressions, and because their O-line wasn't stellar, I think led to a lot of sacks, but it wasn't just their fault either. Yeah, you're right. He kind of seemed like there's always one of those plays where he's falling down and he's just kind of hucking the ball up without looking at where it's going, and you just kind of pray that it's not an interception because every once in a while it would be.
Wow. I hope you guys watched this game all the way through because right at the end there's a guy wearing a gigantic furry Bengals head, like a cat head.
I missed that one.
I watched all that through, but I don't remember seeing that.
Oh, yeah.
I think towards the end of the fourth quarter, I was kind of hoping this game would just end.
Yeah, it kind of felt like that. I mean, they made it competitive at the end somehow. I have no idea how, but it was a pretty rough one. I mean, I'm looking at, from the Bengals perspective, you have Corey Dillon, who's just like a monster, and it was like great to see that. I don't know why they didn't lean on him more. But
that's the thing, yeah.
You look at like our running backs. I'm looking at it and like Redmond, Antoine Smith, and Kevin Falk. And I think Antoine Smith or maybe Kevin Falk. I don't remember. One of those was the top rusher with 33 yards. So I mean, pretty awful all around, I'd say.
I was surprised how much they were trying to get their fullback Mark Edwards involved. Like he had like 3 or 4 carries. They were throwing screens to him.
That was my worst. Their second half first drive was 3 plays calling Mark Edwards' number. First down. And it's like, oh, well, that didn't work. Duh.
That's shocking.
No, I love that guy. He was, he's basically Devlin now, I think. Maybe he touched the ball a little bit more, but same guy.
Yeah. I think he's Devlin, but without the talent around him on offense to take away his touches.
Oh, yeah. Okay. That makes sense.
All right, guys, I got to roll soon.
All right.
Hey, wait. We still have so much to do. Hold on a second.
Yeah, right. You guys can just talk to yourselves then.
Huh?
You guys can talk to yourselves because you guys are doing a great job of that.
Yeah, so just give me your best and worst, and I'll cut it in where it needs to go.
Well, you heard my worst of starting the second half, just dishing the ball to Mark Edwards over and over again.
Yeah, that was a surprising play call, but what are you going to do, I guess?
Reliable.
Yeah, what was your best?
Actually, honestly, watching Corey Dillon and just getting a sneak preview of what he's going to do in the Patriots.
That's true, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he looked the part that he was fast and he was strong, and you don't
he's fast for a big guy.
Yeah. All right, cool.
All right, homies, good night.
All right, take it easy, bud.
Love ya.
All right, well, now that he's gone, let's do a
Still here.
Real podcast.
Oh boy, that was awkward.
Oh, gee.
And I thought he was gone too, and I was going to say some nasty stuff.
No, I didn't even hear the beat.
Thank God I didn't.
All right, now.
All right, now he's actually gone.
Are you lying, or this is
No,
how
I just saw his
I've gotten
name
into
drop
trouble
off.
in the past?
I saw his name drop off the participants list. You can check it.
Oh, the participants list.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe we didn't even touch on like the kicking game, man. That was like the highlight of this whole thing. You have
Really?
Yeah, you have Vinatieri, right?
Yep.
I mean, Money and Snow already at that point building a name for himself. The opposite, you have Neil Rackers. which, I mean, the year before, he went, I can't believe they kept him, but he went 12 for 21. That's rough.
That's like the opposite end of the spectrum there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And then we have like the greatest punter of all time on our team. Apparently,
yes.
I didn't really realize how nasty this guy was, but
it felt like the way they were talking about him, it didn't feel like he was the best punter of all time. It felt like he was the punter who had lasted the longest on the worst teams.
Yeah. It felt like the Vinny Testaverde type of thing.
Because what did he say? The guy's like, I did the math, and Lee Johnson has over 28 miles of punting yards.
Yeah, it's insane. And, I mean, one of the highlights of the game was that 76-yard punt.
Yes, I had that written down, too, in the fourth quarter.
And if that was like the Patriots teams of today, that shit would have been downed at the 1. So it would actually, I mean, it would have been a 76-yard punt, like, for real.
Yeah, oh, yeah. But it was... I was surprised at how quickly they were jumping on those. Like as soon as the ball hit the ground, they all just like jumped on it and didn't like let it bounce and see where it would end up. It was very un-Patriot-like, it felt like.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of a sloppy execution, but I mean, that dude was cool. You know, it's a shame that the punter is one of my highlights, but hey.
Yeah, so far the punter and the highlights.
Well, hey, those are the building blocks of Belichick's teams.
I mean, you're not wrong. I think Troy Brown was also a highlight if we're going to talk about highlights.
All right. Yeah, if you want to be real about it, then, I mean, if we're doing player of the game here, he's obviously the one. What do you have, 107 yards or something like that in the touchdown?
Something like that, yeah. He had that touchdown in the second quarter. And just felt like he was the only guy who was doing any sort of like big plays on offense. Like they didn't have any real big plays. They had one pass the tight end, I think that was probably the longest technical play. I think it was to Jermaine Wiggins, maybe. But it was Troy Brown who was the only one getting open. Like every time they needed something, like in the fourth quarter where they were like stuck in their own territory, like on the touchdown drive. The last touchdown drive, they were on there like they're inside their own 10. And it was third and long, and somehow Bledsoe fit it through two defenders to a falling over Troy Brown. It's like, yeah, that's what I remember. Like I didn't actually remember anything from this game, but that play I think was the most familiar out of all of it.
Yeah, it was interesting. Same for me. I was wondering as we kind of look back at these games how much I would actually remember. This one didn't really stick with me.
No, I had no memory of this game whatsoever. And I thought,
I remember the storylines around it, but I remember like the Brian Cox signing, which I was pretty into, Roman Pfeiffer. But, and it was also interesting, speaking of those guys, I mean, part of the issue, I think, with the defense was they were saying, and I looked into a couple other things, like Richard Seymour was out. Ted Johnson was out. He was dealing with an injury, which kind of reminded me a little bit of the Gronk injury on that like field goal that like shattered his arm. But
because it was in preseason. He was on like punt duty or something like that.
Yep.
And got some sort of hip injury, or I can't remember exactly what they said. It was some leg injury.
Yeah, and then
because the papers were all up in arms about, it was like, oh well, this is why you don't have your starters playing punt on in the preseason. And I thought, well, that's who Belichick is. They just don't know this yet.
Right. I mean, there was never a departure from that, but it was also interesting because I don't know if you saw the stuff that just came out with Ted Johnson about talking about Belichick and their relationship, but I guess they had a rocky relationship for pretty much the entire, the maybe first 3 years that he worked with like Belichick. And then Belichick sort of went up to him and kind of was accountable for the way he was treating him or whatever. Maybe it stemmed from this, but they sort of made amends and then things were solid from that point on.
Yeah, because I remember when Ted Johnson retired, or shortly afterwards, there was a lot of talk about him talking about how the Patriots kind of took advantage of him because he was the run stuffer, and he was a guy that was always like the one to clack heads, and he felt like they hadn't really protected him very well from like head injuries and things like that, I think. So I remember that coming out when he first retired, and that was like kind of some of the reasoning why he did it, why he retired, and it's kind of
But yeah, so he just came out and was kind of talking about sort of Belichick's personality and demeanor, how he treats his players, but then like how he gets them back. So like it's also, this is for another day, but he was also talking about how the Butler thing, how he was benched in the Super Bowl, and obviously he was furious, and then Belichick reached out to him afterwards and kind of made amends. So Ted Johnson's point was that it might have been a tactic on Belichick's part to treat people the way that he does and kind of play the puppeteer, but it's for another day.
Yeah, I mean, you can kind of see that being his MO, whether it is or isn't. But yeah, he's right. Kind of built that mystique around himself, I think.
Yeah, and it works. If you're looking for results, can't argue.
Yeah.
But
exactly.
And then and then I just had. Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, I think the reason that Corey Dillon had such a good game was because there was no Ted Johnson or Richard Seymour, because he rushed for like 140 yards in this game, something along those lines.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I think the team ran for like 140, but I think 157 actually. Corey Dillon, I know he had over 100.
He did, yeah.
How many? Yeah. Oh yeah, it was 104. But yeah, as a team, they ran for like $150.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it was just that it was hot as balls, apparently, and you could just see the defense start to kind of lose their steam slowly every drive because the offense in the third quarter couldn't stay on the field. But I think not having those two players, those two like run defense specialists on the field didn't help either.
Yeah, and then also they were saying that Willie McGinnis he was sort of trying to get back from back surgery, and then Tyler had the foot injury. Yeah. So there's a lot of stuff going on.
Yeah, they were down to like the skeleton crew by the end of it. And I think I don't think this game should have been this close. Because it ended 23-17, so the Patriots were still kind of in it, but I think it was only because for some reason the Bengals offensive play calling decided to keep throwing the ball for no reason.
Yep.
And making all sorts of weird, strange decisions. Like they didn't run a play action pass until like 2 minutes left in the first half when they were gashing the Patriots on the run game. And they just couldn't, they just decided not to try a play action, which would have been the most obvious answer, I thought. But they also decided to punt from the Patriots 35, which I thought was hysterical.
Yeah, but hey, that was a hell of a punt.
Hey, it better be because he's punting at like 20 yards.
It landed when he needed to land.
Yeah, it got it inside the 10, but it's not like they put it on the 1. And I think that set up the Patriots scoring drive, didn't it? Because that was when they were pinned deep and then managed to drive the length of the field and score a touchdown to keep it. Because they were up 13, and then the Patriots scored and kept it close.
Right, yeah. And, if we're talking about how they were running things, the maddening thing watching this game was that, they're running basically a 4-minute drill at the end of the half, the Pats are. And, it basically looks like there's like a minute and a half left on the clock. There's no awareness. People are freaking out. They're hurrying. So it's so different from, let's say, a Brady run offense around that time. And then it ends with a sack. Bledsoe takes a sack, and then the next play is a delay of game. So they got pushed out of field goal range. It was a disaster. And then at the end of the game, the 2-minute drill again was a disaster. It ended horribly.
It was.
And I think that this was a pattern in sort of that era, the Bledsoe era, unfortunately.
Yeah, you can kind of feel why when Brady took over, Belichick was so comfortable with it, because it felt like a lot of these games, even in the 2000 season, the Patriots kind of played to keep it close at the end.
Yep.
And then they kind of set the offense up to have that one last drive to win it, and it just didn't ever really happen because it felt like Bledsoe couldn't run that 2-minute offense. Or But it seemed like there was a lot of people creating other reasons why it wasn't Bledsoe. But at the end of the day, he was kind of the one that was always there in the middle of it, not working.
Right.
And then as soon as Brady comes in, he wasn't playing out of his mind the rest of the game, but he was just managing to find a way at the end of these games to finish them and get the win.
Yeah, I think composure. I mean, the announcers were talking about how Bledsoe's always cool under those moments, and for me, I think that was a big difference. Like you're alluding to, is that it was just a different demeanor where I think you would just panic, to be honest. But
yeah, it felt to me more like this might be too strong a word, but it felt more like a defeatist attitude. Like, here we are again. I have to bring this team back. I gotta put it on my shoulders. Let's give this a shot. See what happens. It wasn't like, it didn't feel like the fire you would see, especially in Brady's early years.
Oh, yeah, you're right.
Yelling out the play at the line, like screaming at people to get in the right position, sort of thing. You know, it just quite gave a shit.
So I agree. Well, I mean, that's tough to say, but
it is, yeah. And I think with Bledsoe being where he was in his career too, and how much punishment he had taken, I don't really hold it against him in any way, because I mean, I've never played any professional sports, but playing men's open soccer on a Thursday night, if you're on a shitty team, you kind of, know what you're getting yourself into. Even if you're the best player on that team, you kind of, it wears on you, just not being on good teams for a while. So I can understand why he would feel that way, but it wasn't successful for any of them.
I definitely played a lot of pickup flag football, and I was consistently one of the better players on the team. So we have a sort of similar plight, I guess you could say. Bledsoe and I mean.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, because I like that you were alluding to me actually being the better player on my soccer team, because I definitely was not.
I don't know about that.
I'm glad you clarified.
Yeah, I mean, I always thought that you were going to take the MLS route, but you proved me wrong.
Yeah, we just did the podcast route instead. Much more lucrative.
That's right. You want to do best moments here?
Yeah, but before we do, I just wanted to touch on that last drive, because I thought the replacement refs kind of reared their head there, because that last drive, even though I don't think the Patriots would have won it, it was still some bullshit calls. Because there was the one early, I say it was like first or second down, where a free rusher came in on Bledsoe, and he kind of shrugged him off and made the throw to Troy Brown, but they called him in the grasp like immediately.
Yep.
And so they gave him the sack and brought it all the way back. So it was, instead of it being like 2nd and 5, it was 2nd and like 18.
Wasn't it kind of on the way down? So it kind of looked like it, but I mean, he still got it off. But yeah,
but it's not something you would have blown dead. You would just waited to see how the play ended, sort of thing. It was like a real quick trigger finger on that whistle. And then I think the next play was probably a sack. Because this is Drew Bledsoe in the 2-minute drill. But so it was the 3rd and like real long, 3rd and 18 or something like that. And Bledsoe actually made the pass to, I don't even know what wide receiver it was. I don't think it was Patton. I want to say it was probably Bert Emanuel, but he went down and made a diving catch.
Yep.
And like it didn't look like it may not have been a catch, but it wasn't anything that you could overturn with replay. And replay, I think, was still pretty new in these days. But they overturned that and called it incomplete, even though there's no like definitive evidence. So now it's like 4th and 18 from your own 20-yard line, and they decide to, like going back to what you said, roll Bledsoe out to his left as a right-handed quarterback, and then he, for all intents and purposes, took a sack on the sideline, throwing it like just kind of shoveling it to whoever offensive line was in the vicinity, so it wasn't an official sack.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of sad because, we didn't really get to see too much more of him moving forward. So that's sort of one of his last big plays, and it is what it is. I mean, fortunately, I don't think anybody really remembers the specifics, but looking back, it hurts a little bit.
Yeah, like I said, I didn't remember any of this game, but a lot of it kind of felt familiar, and that kind of the abject failure at the end of these games. It's like, oh yeah, no, I remember this. I remember when this just used to be the norm, where they'd be close, but they could never quite close the door because they get a penalty that would go against them, and then they would just kind of fall apart from there. Or a play wouldn't go their way early in that last drive, and they just like couldn't make up for it.
Yep.
Whereas now, Brady gets sacked and it's 3rd and 17. It's like, oh well, he'll find Amendola over the middle against the Jaguars for 23 yards in a playoff game, because that's just like they just rebound, and you kind of expect it now almost from these Patriots teams these days. Whereas back then, like the expectation was exactly the opposite.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the epitome of the entire Bledsoe era minus the Super Bowl.
Yeah, and I think the Super Bowl was kind of almost not wanting to believe that it was happening, because this never happens to us as well.
Yeah, I mean, and that was the perfect storm anyway. I mean, the team around them was something else, but clearly putting it on his shoulders, like we've mentioned ad nauseum at this point. And I feel like we're not trying to bash Drew Bledsoe here, but
no,
just watching some of his highlights brings back some painful memories. So.
Yeah, I think just especially because this was kind of later on in his career too. So late career Drew Bledsoe, I think he'd just been beaten down at this point, because I mean, he was setting records before that. Like in his prime, he was a top quarter. I had great fond memories of some of those games when he's throwing 70 attempts to come back from 24 down or whatever it was against the Vikings. Like games like that I still stick out. But 2001, it wasn't for him.
Yeah. He had seen better days. I mean, he played a part in 2001. We get to that later, but
that's very true. Yeah, almost in fairy tale fashion. But yeah, like I said, we'll get to that when we get there. So yeah, let's do our best and worst. You want to go first?
Yeah, I mean, if we're doing, I don't know if we're doing the 3 best moments or the 3 worst.
I mean, I think we've kind of talked about these ad nauseum. So if you just want to pick one of each, I think that's all I have left in my list that we haven't talked about. I don't know.
All right. I mean, all right, fine. The best moment was getting a fumble. It was probably it was one of the best fumbles I've seen outside of like the butt fumble, where, I mean, he basically fumbled with nobody touching it. He just lost sight of the ball. I don't know what happened.
It looked like he was trying to find the laces and then couldn't, so he decided to throw it anyway, and looked like it just like squeezed out of his hand. He just really needed the laces for that.
And it goes flying backwards. And it's amazing, because then like you see Brewski just like flying over people trying to get to him. So it was kind of a fun visual to kind of see the ball just fly out of this guy's hand, and then Brewski comes into the screen. So that was probably
that was actually going to be my best, was seeing Brewski doing his run full tilt at the blocker and just jump over him, do that flip into the quarterback.
Yep.
That was kind of like his signature thing, was just running at the guy and just jumping over him, or trying to, and always getting clipped on the legs, and always like ending up tackling the quarterback with his ass cheeks or the back of his legs, sort of thing.
Yep. And then an honorable mention from me will be Bledsoe scrambling to the right, diving for a first down, helicopter spin.
Yes.
That was pretty awesome. I mean, he scrambled all over the place, like you mentioned, but that was an awesome play.
Yeah, because he had that one, and he also had he tried the quarterback sneak on 4th and 2.
Oh yeah, yep.
Which was a ballsy, gutsy call, and I don't think it was something Belichick was too fond of, like he was saying. I think it may have been thinking outside the box, but he got 1 yard and 3/4, which definitely didn't help.
Right. And then worst moments, I would say the 64-yard return of that they had after the Patriots' first touchdown, like, was sort of backbreaking, I feel like.
I was surprised at how unpatriot like the special teams looked. Like they didn't be very crisp on any of the execution anywhere.
Yeah, it was rough because I mean, you right out the gate, you're scoring a touchdown. You're the lowly Patriots, so it's this boost, and then literally next play, it's sort of shattered.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It did.
And then I'll throw out an honorable mention for this as well. It's more of a cringeworthy thing, but I don't know if you heard the announcer go like, Greg Robinson Randall, what kind of a guy has two names? And then the other announcer goes, oh, he took on his dad's name after he passed. I'm like, oh, that is rough. You could feel the silence after that too. Yeah. That was pretty rough.
That was brutal. Yeah, I think that was a Brent Jones special. That was.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The two names, and Gus Johnson's like, well, actually, he took his dad's name because his dad passed. I'm like, oh boy.
I mean, that's some comedy right there.
Yeah, it was classic. All right, so add to that, I'll give you some honorable mentions too. Some things that we didn't touch on yet. I liked how excited the commentating team was about the what they called the shadow box.
Oh, okay, yeah.
The scores from around the league.
Yep.
This is brand new things. Like you might notice in the top corner, we have what we're calling the shadow box, and it's going to show you updated scores from around the league as they happen. Like, well, yeah, I mean,
do they have the score on the screen at the same time? Because I don't remember ever seeing the score, but I was seeing the other game scores.
No, they did have the score in the top left-hand corner, but it was
but it was constantly changing.
Super hard to read.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, but then in the top right-hand corner, they had what they were calling the shadow box, which is just like a gray box with white scores in it.
Hey,
they were super excited to be announcing that week one. They were able to show scores of other games while this game was happening, which I really thought they had already been doing, but apparently not. And then an honorable mention for the worst was the upcoming schedule, which not particularly funny, but they kept showing the Pats playing the Panthers next week.
Oh, right.
Kept tripping me up, and I was thinking, am I watching the wrong game here? I had to go double check. I'm like, no, this is the right Bengals game. Why are they saying that the Panthers were the next week? And then it finally clicked that between this game and the game that was scheduled for next week was when 9/11 happened. So they canceled those games and pushed them to the end of the season.
Yep.
So a little bit of a downer to end this, because why not, right? It gives everybody
something. That's true. I mean, I can turn it around if you want.
Yes, please.
I could say that because of that, though, they played the Jets, and that's the Mo Lewis hit, which took Bledsoe out. So it could be said that Tom Brady and the dynasty happened because of 9/11.
Oh, way to bring that up a notch.
All right. Well, I guess that's it, guys.
And on that note, we'll be back. We'll be back next time to talk about 2001 Week 2, which, as we all know now, is not against the Carolina Panthers, but will be versus the New York Jets in the game that changed it all. So thanks for joining us, and we will talk to you next time.
Later.
Woo. Bye.